Hi, y'all. Welcome back to Samantha's Beauty Confessions. Today I'm talking to Kendra Henderson, who is somebody that I actually found on Instagram while scrolling through the Explore feed. And I think the reason that her page stood out to me is because of the powerful message that she was sharing. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Kendra opens up about her experience with divorce while raising 5 children, the complexities of co-parenting, and the challenges of living a public life while navigating pain behind the scenes. She shares how she was able to rediscover herself, embrace vulnerability, and find strength in sharing her story. It's truly such an amazing conversation, and I'm so excited for y'all to hear it. So let's welcome Kendra to the podcast. Welcome to Samantha's Beauty Confessions, where we engage in authentic conversations and confess everything it takes to turn our dreams into a reality. Together, we'll unlock your unique beauty and guide you toward living the life of your dreams. Get ready to go beyond the highlight reel, embrace the journey, and grow together, one conversation at a time. Hi, y'all. Welcome back to Samantha's Beauty Confessions. Today, I am so excited to be talking to Kendra Henderson, who I randomly discovered her, I guess you'd say, on my Explore feed when I was just scrolling, wasting time on Instagram as usual. And I instantly knew after seeing her post that she was someone I wanted to talk to because of the message that she was sharing. She is someone who's also been through a divorce. And if you're listening, then you know that that's something that was a really pivotal moment for me personally, and it sounds like Kendra is the same way. So I'm super excited to chat with her today and hear about her 5 children and just her journey of growth through that process. So hi, Kendra. Welcome to the
Hi.
podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. Happy to
Yes,
be.
we were talking offline, but I truly think that the 5 kids aspect was something that I was like, oh my gosh, that's a whole other layer to going through a divorce because I don't have kids.
Yeah, it does change the landscape tremendously.
Yeah. So how long were you married?
We were married like 12 years, give or take. I can't remember exactly, but about 12 years and together for a couple years before that. So,
Oh
and
gosh, yeah.
I was 18 when we got together. So my entire adult life, basically.
Wow. Yeah. I was with him for like 2 years before, married for like 3. So
hmm
you were married a long, long time and during very pivotal moment or time period through your life.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was 10 years older. And so there was always this kind of like, let's hurry up and get married and have kids and that kind of thing. And I was just as much, running that show as he was. But it was really like I grew up in that marriage, so to speak. I mean, from 18 forward, I was in the mindset of hurry up and get married and pop out a bunch of babies. And that was just all I did.
Yeah, for sure. So have you always been on Instagram since the beginning of your divorce, or was that something that you didn't start until after the fact?
No, so I used to have a mom blog years and years ago, back when that was the thing. And I had an Etsy shop where I made baby onesies and shared our daily life on Instagram. I mean, if you really want to do the deep creep, you can scroll back to the end of time. And I think my first Instagram post was when I was pregnant with my first Baylor. He's now 12. And I just kind of had always shared in our family. Actually, one of the things that sort of made this whole divorce thing wild was our family life was very, very public. My ex-husband is a speaker. He travels around the world and speaks. He has a very public life. We documented a lot of our family. We documented our kids. And there were so many people that were just, people feel invested when you share on social media in your life, as they should to a degree, right? And the people were just like, what in the world? Because again, everything looks perfect on Instagram, right? Where nobody's just out there trolling all their trash through the internet. Everything looks like, oh my God, I thought you guys had the best marriage. I mean, I can't tell you how many people were like, oh, we looked up to your marriage so much. And it wasn't like behind closed doors, it was this big, awful thing. It was just kind of nothing.
I totally relate to the whole everything is perfect on Instagram. I say that probably once a day still because
Yeah.
it's just every single day. I've been divorced now almost 5 years, but I always say that the first 2, I was in such shock myself that I don't remember that time period. So I'm really kind of 3 years out mentally, I guess. But
Yeah.
Same with what you were saying. When I told people about what I was going through, they couldn't believe it because I'd never told them anything that's going on behind the scenes, which I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's hard to even share that stuff like when you're having trouble in your marriage or even considering divorce. I mean, just the consideration of it, you're just like, ugh, this is a bad feeling. It's hard to share that with the people that are close to you in your life, let alone all the random people on the internet who think they need to have a say in your life or an opinion or whatever. And, being online, you welcome that a little bit, but there is such a fine line there between people overstepping. And so I think people just don't know what goes on. Still, I mean, I kind of joke like I have a whole nother life that people don't see on the internet because I don't need them to.
Yeah, and the opinions going through just the decision making process for me was enough in and of itself that the outside noise would have been just so bad for my mental state.
Yeah, I had people like, so we separated and we did what's called bird nesting. So we had an apartment in the city and a house, like our family home basically. And our kids always stayed in the home. We did this for a year and we would go back and forth to the apartment. We shared this apartment in the city. And so when it was your turn with the kids, you were at the home. And people would be like, "Where are you?" We hadn't filed for divorce at this, like in the beginning of this process, because we were kind of just like, "Hey, this is us separating. Let's how this works," kind of thing. And I mean, just the like that you shouldn't be away from your kids and like people's opinions. And Colin's that was my ex-husband, such an incredible guy, which he's a great guy. Like no shade because he really is. But it's so taboo to divorce somebody that's not hitting you or an alcoholic or cheated on you, or it's like I get to be unhappy and like change my life because of it. Just because I signed this piece of paper, I believe in marriage and I love marriage, but I have a lot of time left in my life. When we got divorced, I was like, I think I was 31 or I just like fresh 30s. And so anyways, yeah, you get so many opinions. And I think the thing that I sought most in that whole process was clarity. And it's not from anybody but yourself. That's the ugly truth.
Well, and you can't get clarity when you're living your life as normal with that person because
No.
then you just get in that routine. And like you said, you were young, you are young, you have a whole life ahead of you. And so just because I believe in marriage too, but I also think that people change and it's not just, sometimes it's both people changing together, which is great, but sometimes you just fall out of love or you just grow different directions. And there's no harsh feelings for that. There was a drug problem with my divorce. So I think for me, I had to go through that whole thing, plus the others' opinions, plus just the shock factor of it.
Yeah.
But I think no matter what, it's never an easy thing to go through. And I don't think that you can make decisions like that continuing day-to-day life like you were.
No, I think really what led me to even separating, because, it's just such, as like just such an ugly and hard decision. And I just kept repeating to myself, like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And I remember telling my husband at the time, I was like, something has to change and it's got to be something dramatic. It can't just be like, oh, I'm going to go out with my friends once a week or something like that. Like if we ever have any chance of this ever working, something has to change. And obviously it didn't work as in staying in a marriage, but it gave me so much clarity in being able to kind of step out and say, okay, I have space. I can kind of hear myself think, feel what this feels like to be without you. And, it's like, can I live without you or can I not live without you or can I live with you? And for me, it was like, I can live without you.
Yeah. And also the kids, that's a whole other layer to it that, you have to think about them and their well-being. And yeah, y'all could have gotten along probably for their life, but you want them to see a happy, healthy marriage, I'm assuming. And so like you had to kind of weigh those out too. How long did you said you did the bird nesting for like a year?
We did it for about 6 months though, or 5 months maybe before we filed for divorce. So, but I think one of the hardest things in this process for me was trusting myself and my instinct of like, hey, I shouldn't be here. Like I know that this is over. And typically I'm full of conviction. And in this situation, there's so many other factors at play. And so it was really hard for me to own that like this is how I'm feeling. And so I gave it more time than I knew I needed to, but I also was like, I don't want it to look like I just made a rash decision. I don't want to make a rash decision. And I also feel like, this gives me enough time to really have more clarity than I need, so to speak. And so we filed for divorce like 4 months. I filed for divorce 4 months after kind of moving into two separate houses. And then, but we continued all the way through until our divorce was final, which, as I don't know if you experienced this, but our actual divorce took almost a full year. And so we bird nested through that entire time. And it was a really good transition for our kids. It gave them a lot of stability and peace without there was already so much being shaken up that allowing them to kind of stay in that same home and have their circumstances, their day-to-day circumstances not change dramatically was really like, if you can do it, obviously it's not for everybody and there's a lot of circumstances at play, but if you can do it, it really was a great situation for our family.
So what about for you during that process? Because I'm sure, going from being a full-time mom of five, I don't know, you said your ex-husband travels for work a lot, so it was probably mainly you taking care of the kids.
Yeah, it was until we separated. He had never stayed overnight by himself with our kids. I mean, when I tell you I was a 24/7 full-time mom, it was everything for me. It was all I did, all I had. And I talk about this in my podcast, but I did this thing called the Summer of Me. And I kind of had this epiphany. So when I stopped nursing my fifth baby, she was 2. And I stopped nursing her. And it was the first time in 11 years that I wasn't pregnant or nursing because I had gotten pregnant and then nursed my kids through this and the whole thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm an independent human. I can actually leave the house for longer than 2 hours or 3 hours. And I have a little bit of freedom. And I started to kind of wake up from this existence that I had lived in for so long, which I don't regret or hate or anything like that. But I was like, okay, it's kind of time for the next phase of my life. And I was like, this is going to be the summer of me. Like, I'm going to do the things that I want to do and, step out a little bit and just live because I had been living to serve everybody else in my life for those, last 11 years, whether it was my husband or my kids, my family, like everything. And so I did this Summer of Me and I quickly became very inconvenient to a lot of people around me, including my husband, because it was like, oh, wait, you have needs too? Like, ugh, we're good. And so it wasn't until that he really had to step up as a parent because before that point, he traveled every week. He just still does travel every week. And the kids were just my responsibility,
Yeah. And not only had you been pregnant or nursing for that long, you also got married so young that
So young.
you never really had the chance to go and just be and have fun because you went from high school to marriage to being a mom. But yeah, I think that would be a whole whirlwind in and of itself, just redefining like, who am I?
Yeah.
So what did that look like for you? Did you instantly get in therapy? What was the Summer of Me kind of like?
Well, I did a lot of things. I kind of promised myself like I'm just going to try different things. When I tell you I was sheltered from up until this point, I had grown up very religious in a very sheltered environment. There was a lot of pressure and shame around purity and all these things. And so I really, to your point, I really went from a child to marriage. Like there was no in between. And I had really had no opportunity to like sow my wild oats, so to speak. And it's something that for my own girls, I have 4 girls and like something I really want to empower them to do. Obviously, there's a fine line there between going out and just being a disaster out there. But I just never got that opportunity. So obviously, like we were married during this time, so I wasn't doing that kind of thing. But I really was like, I'm gonna go I'd never done like girls' night out. I had never gone to a bar. I was never like a work trip. Like I passed everything by because I was like, my priority is to be home with my family and my kids. And I started like doing workout classes and I did therapy and I would go places by myself. Like I would book a night at a hotel and stay there by myself. I just was like, I just got to try things. Like I haven't lived. I really felt like I have so much inside me and I had this deeper calling to feel like to be something bigger than I felt like I was. And not that sounds egotistical to say, but really I find so much joy and passion in being a mom. And I never want to be like, oh, I'm just a mom. But I also was like, this is a season in our life, right? Like, so what now? My purpose in terms of nursing a baby and like rocking babies to sleep and feeding and all these things, like that ends. And then you're stuck with, you're either going to be like helicopter mom and like drive everybody else crazy or like resuscitate your identity. And so that's kind of where I started. And, eventually I got into like, once we had separated and kind of moved forward, like deciding that our marriage was going to end, I did sow my wild oats a little bit, which It sort of was one of those things I did backwards, and it was inevitable. But, on the nights that I didn't have the kids, like I would go out and stay at a bar till 2 a.m. And like we live in Nashville. So listening to country music with my friends and like, I again, like there's no right or wrong. I obviously did it like very backwards from how most people do it. But I look back at those times with fond memories and also just like, this was just an integral part of my growth. And my therapist used to say like the pendulum will swing and you're going to do things that like, maybe I was like, I drank a little bit too much or I, was out with my friends too late or whatever. And eventually you level out into just like who you actually are. And that's kind of where I've landed is like, this is who I am. I still enjoy having fun and going out with my friends, but like, the real me is at home in my bed at 9 o'clock at night watching my best friend's wedding, with my kids sleeping.
Well, and I mean, yes, you had to sow your wild oats, but also like if you didn't do that, like say that you just would have stayed in your routine and just healed, like that's fine too. But later on in life, you'd have been like, wait, what if I would have done that? I just think that everyone, and this is something that it's taken me until very recently to figure out, but like in school, I'm in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. There's like electives, like as you get older. And the electives are like yearbook or photography or whatever. It's like we need like relationship classes, friendship courses, financial stuff. I don't know. I just think that the emphasis when we're younger is put on education, which is perfectly fine. We need that. But those little electives, I think, could be used in a better way. That's 100%. Something I was telling my boyfriend last night, actually, is that I'm about to start going around and promoting this in my town, at least, because I think it would help with so much stuff just for people to learn how to have grace and empathy and patience and just understanding of other things besides math and science.
100% agree. We need a bigger worldview. I definitely think that that's something that like is missing. And I see that with my own kids too. They're so concerned with like certain concrete things. And I'm like, were your intentions pure? Do you have a good heart? Were you kind? Were you considering like, did you have empathy towards that person? Like, there's just so much of a bigger conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah. And I want to fix the world. I feel like more times than not, I'm just like, I see something going so wrong right here. And I just want to tell this person. But I think that really experience is the only way people can learn and truly believe in it, because it kind of goes back to like when we're young, our parents are telling us what to do and we're like, why would we do that? But it's because they know what's best. We just don't want to believe it at the time.
Yeah. And I think truly like we have to go through it on our own. Like there's so many things that people can tell you all day long, but unless you experience it yourself and learn those lessons the hard way, you don't understand.
Yeah. And one thing that I don't know if I saw this on your page or heard it on your podcast, but you said that you journaled during your healing, which I am so envious that you did that, because my mom, I remember her telling me multiple times to do that, to journal, because she's been through a divorce and she knows probably what she wishes she would have done again. But I couldn't stop crying when I would try to write. Like my paper was just drenched. And you said you typed, didn't you?
Yeah, I did for the most part. I still have it on my phone. It's called Idea. It's the note on my phone, and it's pages and pages long. And it's taken me from like the very beginning. And like it says like I'm not considering like divorce, but like I'm just like really unhappy. And it's taken me all the way through like, and you could read like where I got really angry in our divorce and like just different phases of that experience. And then it's taken me through all the years of dating. And now I'm in a very serious relationship with somebody and through that relationship. And like, it's been so helpful to look back on. I started doing that because I truly felt like it's like you've heard the quote, maybe if you're not writing it down or speaking it, you're carrying it. And that gets really heavy. And for me, it was like, I couldn't hold everything that I was feeling, but I couldn't write fast enough. And my therapist at one point had said, like, that's probably something you need to realize is you're thinking faster than you can even process. Like you need to slow down. But I just would sit and just type nonstop and just vomit out my thoughts because I really was like, I have to just process what I'm going through. And it was so clarifying so many times to just kind of get it out on paper and be like, yep, that's it. That's where I am. That's what I'm feeling. And it's been just absolutely wild to look back on.
I know. I wish that I would have thought then to voice record myself.
Yeah.
Because I don't even know if I could have typed. I mean, I was like in shock too. And it was just a whole thing. But like, I'm so now when I go through things, I just remodeled my salon and the days where I felt like I was really screwing up on this thing, I would get on my voice notes and I would record. And I'm so glad I did that. But unfortunately, I didn't do it during the most life-changing thing I've ever been through.
Yeah. And I tell people on my podcast all the time, like, and I truly feel like so redundant saying it on the podcast because I probably say it every episode I record, but it is true. And I write it down, because not only is it incredible learning, like when you look back at it, but it is just very therapeutic.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. And it allows you to really, really process through the emotions because like you said, if your brain goes faster than or if your mind's thinking faster than life's really going, sometimes we convince ourselves or like gaslight ourselves into thinking one thing that's totally not even true.
Yeah, absolutely. And there would be times where I would write stuff down and I'm like, that is so far in the distance. Like for me, it was like I would obsess over finances and like, where are we going to live? And, we had this big, beautiful home that we had just bought recently before we got divorced. And I wanted to stay in this house and I was going to do everything in my power to stay in this house. And I was like, I would write business plans and all these things. And come to realize, like through reading all this writing, it was something I had to let go of. It was a big thing that I was like still holding on to. And it helped me to write all this stuff out and then be like, why are you so obsessed with keeping this house? The only reason that I was obsessed with it was like I wanted to maintain status quo for my kids and to have them feel. And what I realized in that is like that's not teaching them anything. They're going to have to understand that like life changes when things happen like this, and it's okay. We can still come out on the other side. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think them just seeing that you and their dad have a civil relationship is so beneficial. And that's, something that unfortunately a lot of people who get divorced with children, they're unable to do that. So I think that's really awesome. And you all live in the same town? You both do?
Yeah. So we live like 5 minutes from each other. We kind of made a pact like, hey, let's keep everything in our life. I mean, we obviously have a lot of kids. So like keeping our life simpler. So we live within 5 minutes of each other. And we're like, the goal is that we always do, whether one of us moves, like we kind of agree to kind of move around together. And we get along really well. I think you just have to understand and like, just make a cognitive decision that like this isn't about us anymore. It's not about our fight or what our disagreements. Like we obviously got divorced. There's clearly some disconnect there, right? But like at the end of the day, it's not our kids' fault. They didn't choose this. And like, the best thing that we can do for them at this point is to get along and like be very, very friendly to each other and help each other out. And so, if he's traveling, I'll pick up slack and vice versa. We took the kids to Disney World together for spring break, and it makes life so peaceful. It really does. And it's obviously there's circumstances in which that's not always possible for people, but I think if you can swallow your pride and just say like, this isn't about me anymore. It's about my kids. And, then it really does benefit them greatly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you said before we even started recording that like when you were going through it, there was no resources. Like obviously there was books, and I feel the exact same way. Like there were books out there, but now I feel like with TikTok and Instagram and Reels and all the things that more and more people it's kind of like this domino effect. Someone opened up and said something about their non-perfect life, and then it's just kind of gone from there. Do you think that, I know like hindsight's 2020, but do you feel like you would have ended up in a different place maybe, or like gotten through it quicker or something if those resources would have been more available to you during that time?
I think I would have felt more validated. I don't even think I was on TikTok when this whole thing was going down. But I think like what I didn't understand or couldn't kind of grasp was like, am I the only one like divorcing somebody for these reasons, for my needs not being met, or for just like falling out of love, for growing apart from somebody, from deciding that like I'm actually not the person you married. That was me trying to prove myself and to earn love and like to be the person that I needed to be as a child and all of these things, instead of like me who has just this like crazy wild side and artistic and fun. And like I didn't ever let myself be that until after I had kids, and I was like, wait, this is actually who I am, and it's who I've been all along. And so I felt so alone in choosing that, because I was like, wow, this is really selfish. And now of course you hear so much on social media, TikTok, whatever it is, that like, it's okay to love yourself enough that like, this is, and decide this isn't for you or whatever. For me, it was really the resources that were lacking. And, come to find out some of this was just like my own things that I had to kind of come to terms with. But I would Google things like how to tell your spouse you want a separation.
Me too.
How do you separate from somebody? Do I have to legally separate from somebody? How do you broach the subject of like, I'm thinking about a divorce? Like, I mean, if I could have saved my Google history, like, is it rude to write a letter telling somebody that you want to separate? Is it, all these things? And it's like, nobody really can probably answer those, but I just felt so alone even asking them.
Yeah, because it's not normal. I remember that I looked up, how do I know how long is enough time
Oh, yeah.
to give it, because you're constantly questioning. Because I mean, it is it's like a death in a lot of ways. It's like grieving the life that you thought you were going to have and
Yeah.
you really believed it, or else you wouldn't have married that person. And then it's like they're still alive walking around. But, well, for me, especially, you have children, so it's a little different. But I mean, my ex husband just walks around the same places that I
Yeah.
do. And we just act like we don't even know who each other are, which is kind of messed up if you want to know the truth. It's kind of weird. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that I was weighing the pros and cons, but no one wants to tell you what to do in those times either. That's what I found is I could ask my friends or ask my mom or whatever, but either they hadn't been through it or they didn't want to influence my decision.
Yeah. And I feel like people tend to just back out. Like it's, oh, this is too much for me. I can't, like, either they can't handle it, it brings up something for them. They say there's like I think your chance of divorce goes up 50% if your best friend gets divorced. It's like some crazy statistics, very, very high. And I had friends that would be like, kind of like hinting that like my husband doesn't really want me to hang out with you anymore, or like, people just don't. Generally, it makes them very uncomfortable, which I understand, but it still leaves you dead and alone, right? It is like the most isolating and depressing, part of, at least for me, it was the most isolating, depressing part of my entire life.
No, for sure. And I went through a phase, I don't know if you did, but this is probably when I went from very depressed to the up. Like I was starting to go uphill. My mom actually one day was like, Samantha, you cannot tell people that like just divorce them. Because I got to the point, I got to the point where my clients were like, my husband does this, this, and this. And I'm like, girl, I swear there's a better life on the other side. And my mom's like, stop doing that. You cannot encourage that.
I'm totally the same. I'm like, I mean, it's rough to get through, but once you're on the other side, like life is good.
You'll be glad you did, I promise. But another thing I ran into, which I think is kind of weird, is I don't know if weird's the right word, but it was hurtful, I guess, is that people, once I very first started talking about it online or just, like a normal thing that had happened to me, people were very standoffish and kept saying to me, like, you don't have to just keep telling people you've been through that. But I felt like it was something that made me relatable and like a real human because like you said earlier, like Instagram, social media just shows a highlight reel of everyone's life. And there was so much more behind the scenes that created who I was. So did you feel like people, when you started opening up, like told you to kind of calm down with it too, or no?
They still do. I mean, I get it constantly. It's like, don't let your divorce define you, or why do you like stop talking about this? It's so unhealthy, or, just I think generally it triggers something for people, and it's like likely the reality is that they're likely struggling with something, and it's a little bit too close to home, or it's too real. And so like I think there was people close to me for sure that was like it was very hurtful that they just decided this isn't for me. My very best friend like told my ex-husband that like when we had separated, she's like, oh, I guarantee she's just like having an affair. That's why she's doing all this. And I was like, 0%. That was not what was happening at all. But she like, and it just started like in him, like it started this doubt. And I'm like, you have no like there's no, she just said that, but it's like, she was unhappy in her situation. And like but like there was a lot of moments that were like very hurtful. And I think people on the internet, again, like they get to have their opinions or whatever, but like doesn't mean I need to listen to it. I am quick to block people, quick to delete people's comments, or just like tell people like, see ya, like that you clearly like this is not a place you want to be. So like, why are you here? And then just for all those people, there's 10x the amount of people that are like, thank you, this is changing my life. You're helping me so much. And I think that's just how it goes for everything. People just want to say something.
Yeah, they do. I think too that it's the first time that you put something out, like it is so intimidating and scary or whatever, but just that one message you get back from people that are like, this helped me.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, okay, so that person was sitting in their house just like I was 5 years ago and like I remember getting on the podcast app and typing in like divorce and just seeing what popped up. And yeah, there were episodes that popped up, but they weren't like you were saying, they didn't relate to my story. So it's like I was hearing someone else's situation that was nothing like mine. And so I'm thinking,
Hmm.
well, crap, how do I navigate this one then? You know?
I think also age. I mean, you're young, obviously. Like for me, it was like everybody that was talking about this was like they had high school kids or they were much older and like had this, whole life, or there was just some big event or something like that. And I was like, man, I am just a 30-year-old that has just decided I'm unhappy and ready to change my life. And like I have a whole lifetime ahead of me. And I get to choose to do something different with it. And I genuinely felt like it's not too late. Like, and all these podcasts about divorce were so much later than the stages I was in my life. And it was even, and I would even search divorce on like divorce, like young divorced people on like Instagram and stuff like that. You just don't get anything because it's like, it's just not I guess it's not as talked about or popular. I don't know, but I just felt like so in the minority there.
Well, yeah. And two, I think if it's like a bad divorce, like maybe people are scared, but I don't know. I think that one thing positive that came from it of me is that now I am so like slow to judge people's situations. Like
Oh,
whatever they're doing, if that makes them happy, who cares?
yeah. So be
Like,
it.
yes, it has nothing to do with me. And that's what, like, a message that I hope to just keep pushing out there online is just like, let people be. Because number one, you never know who they truly are inside. You never know, like, what they're craving or needing. And you never know what's going on behind the scenes that's making them want to do those things. So just, again, it goes back to people in school teaching things like we need
Hmm.
to learn how to have empathy for people.
Yeah. I think too, I went for a really long time in my life and was just like head down, powering through like having kids. And like I didn't have like a lot of empathy for people's situations because it was just not even on my radar. And I was quick to judge like what people were doing or like how they were handling a situation. And my husband at the time and I would always say that'll never be us. We'll never get divorced. Like, I look back at those times and I didn't have the experience to know, but like so close-minded about just like people's experiences and stuff. And going through this process has given me so much empathy for people. I struggled really, really, really deeply with depression through this whole thing and ended up on antidepressants. And just like there was days upon days where, and you just said the same thing too. Like I couldn't stop crying and like couldn't get out of bed. Like I had no will to keep going because it was like, this is just like the bottom of the bottom. And it gave me such a deep empathy for people who are struggling in any regard, really. And also, like you said, like just if they're doing something that you don't agree with, like you don't know why they're doing that. You don't know
Mhm.
what their story is or how they're handling things or, what's going on behind the scenes. And you have no right to say anything aside from like, I see you, I'm here if you need to talk.
Hmm. Yeah. So now, like now that you're kind of a few years removed of it, do you think you'll get remarried again, or do you want to get remarried again? I know you said you have a serious boyfriend, but marriage is something my boyfriend and I have been together for a long time, but I'm still kind of like,
Gun
I
shy.
just don't know. Like I want to be with him. I don't ever want to not be with him. It's just something about the legality of it to me is still it was hard to get out of and it freaks me out.
Yeah, let's clear the air here for everybody. Marriages are damn near impossible to get out of. I mean, it is like so much harder than I ever realized. But yeah, I do want to get married again. I loved being married. I loved like having that like security with somebody and that like just that like it's just you're there together. I think you can get that outside of a marriage for sure. And I think I don't think that there's any reason why like you couldn't just be in like a long-term partnership with somebody and not get married. I think I'll end up getting remarried eventually and it doesn't necessarily scare me, but on the flip side of that, like I'm the one who chose to end that marriage,
Hmm.
my first marriage. So I think, had I been maybe in a different position, like your position, obviously, where it's like you're shocked and like didn't
Shocked.
choose this life, like I probably would feel a little bit differently. I also will do things so different and have done things like with this other relationship like so different from the get-go. You're very cautious to like, not fall into the same traps because it's terrifying.
Hmm. Before you said that, I was actually thinking like, I wonder if just each, since your situation there wasn't this big blow up necessarily. Like for me, it was like I had no clue that the drug use was going on. I just came
Hmm.
home to a big volcano that had erupted. And so I think, yeah, it's kind of like it's not that I really believe that that will happen again, but what if it does? Like I never believed it
Mm-hmm.
would before, you know? But now, I mean, my boyfriend and I have been together like longer than I was married. So I feel like each day that passes, it gets a little easier to see that happening. But for the first like 2.5, 3 years, I was like, nope, no chance we're getting married.
It's hard to trust somebody, and I think you also like through this. For me, I proved to myself like I'm good on my own. I don't,
Mhm.
and it sounds like, and it's very taboo, like I don't need a man kind of thing, but it's true. Like financially, I do great. Stuff around the house, I do great. Like the kids, I'm fine. And so when you don't need it, and you're not like, okay, like searching because you're trying to find something specific in somebody, it makes you a little bit pickier, but it also just like there's no sense of urgency.
Mhm.
But I definitely think like you toe the line very carefully because it's not just as quick of a decision as it was at one point.
So, but does your boyfriend now have kids too?
No.
No? Oh, well,
Mm-mm.
that's awesome.
He wants a kid though.
He does.
Yeah. I'm like,
Would
oh,
you want
time's
another one?
ticking. Yeah, I would do another one for sure. For sure.
That's
You know,
awesome though that he doesn't have kids. I mean, because that is my boyfriend doesn't have kids either, and he's never been married. Has yours been married?
mm-mm.
See, I feel like that's rare, don't you?
Yeah, yes, for sure. And I think, people would be like, you need to like find a dad who has a couple kids. And I'm like, I would 10 times over again rather have one more or one or two more even of my own kids than like take on somebody else's kids.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that like he has chosen to do that. And like, I know that it's like such an uphill battle and not an easy task to just like, you've never had kids, you've never been around kids. And then like, you're just like going to take, 5 kids under your wing and love them. But for me, I'm like, I don't know. I guess having gone through a divorce, it just like makes me so jaded for like I like was like very not interested in like having somebody who'd been married and had kids. It was just
Yeah.
like it was a no for me.
No, I love that. And I think that's awesome that he's just like open arms, accepting and just loves it. That's so cool. Okay, so do you like looking back now, what advice would you have for anyone who may feel kind of like they're just head down and just surviving in a marriage or motherhood, or not necessarily like we're trying to tell people again like we used to get a
Yeah.
divorce, but just like what tips would you have to kind of redefine yourself in that phase of life?
I think it's really, really important, and this is just like such a simple exercise, is like to make a list. Like what are 10 things that you love and that like are part of you outside of all of the people in your life that you love and serve, right? It's like it's so easy for us to be like, tell me about yourself. Well, I'm a mother of 5 kids and I work. Okay, well, that's like about everybody else that like you're doing things for. So I always tell people like just like make a list of like who you are. Like I'm a creative. I'm a passionate writer. I'm like whatever it is about you, and figure out how to like dive into those things, because what happens I think in any situation like where you're in a marriage or kids or whatever is like you lose yourself. And so much of my message has been about like resuscitating or reviving your identity, because we all have that like, inner child or that person like deep down like that is who we really are. And it's so easy to like put those needs to the side and put those priorities to the side, because it's like everything else takes priority, so to speak. But like if we don't prioritize ourselves, we're not going to expect the other people in our lives to prioritize us. And for me, I enabled a lot of my ex-husband's behavior because I didn't prioritize myself. So like I didn't expect him surely to prioritize me, and I didn't know how to ask for it. And so like really kind of getting down to like, what do I like to do? Do I like to hike? Do I like to go out to eat? Do I like to read books? Like, and do some of those things independently, or like express to your spouse, like, I want to do some of these things, and just don't make it about everybody else in your life. That would be my number one. And my number two is, and this is something that I've really like worked so hard on in all of the relationships in my life, but especially like with my boyfriend, is like, you got to communicate. Like it's never comfortable to communicate your needs. It's just not, but like it really is like the bridge to peace in your relationships. And for me, it's like it's uncomfortable, right? Like to say like, well, I really needed you to do this, or I really wished you would have done this, or can you please make sure that this happens? And every time I do it though, it's like a breath of fresh air. I'm like, okay, like something, because when you're with somebody who reciprocates that and they change, it gives you like one more like block in your like system of belief that like somebody's going to love me and be willing to do the things that I need them to do.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. And I always tell people like even take a weekend to just go to a hotel and just be alone, just not with music playing in your headphones. Like that was something I turned to was I always had headphones in my ears,
Oh,
blaring music.
same.
So I couldn't think. So it's like I couldn't feel. I was busy, occupied, but just sitting in the silence, a lot of clarity just comes from that.
Yeah, I actually dated a guy for a bit who was like really, really, really into meditating, like deeply into it. And I learned to meditate from him. And it's one of the best like takeaways I've had in like a relationship was like feeling like, okay, I actually can be alone with my thoughts and it won't like kill me. I was the same. I call them like my emotional support headphones. I
Me too.
did not that and my sunglasses. I didn't leave the house. I was like the weirdo that wore my sunglasses like inside everywhere. I could not bear to make eye contact with people. It would like make me instantly cry. And so it was like sunglasses and headphones. Like people were probably like, "What? Who does this girl think she is? Like some celebrity?" And I was like, "No, I'm just depressed and grieving my entirety."
I'm just
Um,
blocking off everything that you
yeah,
could see into my soul with. I
yeah.
can't talk to you. I can't look at you, nothing.
Yeah, but it really like being in silence, whether it was meditating or like you said, like going to somewhere by yourself. I mean, I would travel a lot like on the weekends that I didn't have the kids and like just being on an airplane was like so therapeutic. I would just sit and like think and look
Hmm.
at the window and just be like, okay, one foot in front of the other. Like, what do I need to process? What do I need to think about?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I love just like I always just love hearing people's stories. I think that everyone has such an amazing story no matter what they've been through. And I love like I feel like I'm 100 years old in my soul. I want to hear about everything that everyone ever does. So, I'm just so glad that you were willing to come on and share, but tell everyone before you go where to find you and about your podcast and all the things that you have going on.
Yeah. I'm on Instagram at Kendra for now. I used to be Kendra Hen, which is my last name's Henderson. And I it was I didn't know what to change it to after my divorce. I was like, I'm Kendra for now. And
That
my podcast is called The Summer of Me, and you can stream it on all podcast platforms and then or you can watch it on youtube.com. And that's kind of where I hang out for the most part.
awesome. Y'all go follow her and watch all of her amazing videos with all of her awesome advice.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was so fun.
Okay, y'all, that's it for today's episode. Be sure to follow the show on whatever platform you're listening and leave a rating and review to show your support so we can continue growing together. If today's episode really resonated with you, you can always share it to your story and be sure to tag me so I can personally thank you. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I'll talk to you again next week.